the mic? Who's listening? Mike, that's good? Okay.
I just want to get a drink of water before I get
okay.
down.
Okay, can you hear me on this? Okay, so before Chris comes back and I introduce him, I wanted to make an announcement. So we wanted to remind you that tonight is the second lab. So let's see if I can manage 24-hour time. So it's from 7 to 8:30 tonight. In this, I think this is the same location that the first lab was in, but that it's in the basement of Lawson in 142 and 158. And the topic tonight is going to be text categorization, and it looks like you're going to be using examples of naive Bayes and logistic regression algorithms to try to do some text categorization on the fly. So everybody who's interested, show up at the lab session tonight. And let's see, should I go ahead and introduce you?
Yeah, well, let me see if I have the microphone working first.
And then you'll hang, this can hang around.
Oh, I need that too.
This is the video mic, so you won't hear any amplification from this. This is if you actually need them to hear you louder. So I need to use this to introduce you.
Okay.
If you feel like you can yell loud enough, then you won't need this. Otherwise, you can hang it around your neck.
I think I can probably, well, Aaron, why don't I just do it? Then I don't have to shout, right?
Yes.
Okay,
let me
you sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, we're ready to go. So it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Chris Raphael, who is the head of the Music Informatics program down at Indiana University, and he has appointments in the Jacobs School of Music, the Cognitive Science Department, and the Statistics Department down there. And he, before coming to IU, he was actually at UMass Amherst for many years, where he was my staff professor. So I think of the 3 machine learning courses I took when I was in grad school, I took 2 of them from Chris. And so unfortunately he left before he could be on my dissertation committee and moved to IU, but I followed him here to Indiana, even though I don't do musical informatics now. That's just a joke. Okay, so before that he got his PhD in applied math from Brown in 1991, and he's worked on a wide range of problems in applied math statistics, ranging from character recognition and digit recognition to mind detection.
Mind detection, yep.
And then he sort of veered into this new world of musical informatics, and he is I get to run into him many times at AI stat conferences and machine learning conferences, where he does this really interesting work on trying to mimic and detect patterns in music using statistical techniques. So I think you're in for a great talk, and I'll pass it over to you now. Great.
Thanks for the very nice introduction. Can you folks hear me okay? Because I'd rather not shout. I'd like to sort of, okay, good. All right, so here I am speaking in the summer school. So I suppose that I come in part as a teacher. That's what the little picture is about. I guess I view the principal role of teaching as trying to find some way to prepare the next generation of researchers to do bigger and better things that we do, passing the baton, like in the picture. And I'm going to do a very uncharacteristic thing for starters here. I'm just going to give a little bit of personal history of mine. You got a bit from Jen. I'm going to do a little bit more. I almost never do this, but I think you'll see why I'm going to do it when I finish. I started off, I wanted to be a musician, I wanted to be an oboist. And I guess I had sort of a promising start at this. And in fact, I was a professional musician for a number of years in my 20s. The competition gets fiercer and fiercer. And I think at some point I realized there was a personality mismatch on my part. It wasn't something that I was going to be happy doing. And As some sort of fallback, I decided to get an undergraduate degree in computer science. This was intended to be my day job, the backup plan, if you will. And just totally by accident, I ended up loving it. That wasn't the plan at all. And I went off to graduate school. I did my graduate work at Brown and applied math. And just the one thing about my graduate experience I want to reflect on was this thing that happened to me a number of times, which I came to see as sort of a defining thing for me as a researcher, although it's very easy to see this kind of thing in retrospect, and I didn't know it all at the time. I would learn about something. So many of the things that you're learning about now, Fourier transforms, or dynamic programming, or hidden Markov models, or statistics, graphical models, all these things. And my response to this, maybe not in these words, but this was going on in my mind. I know how to use this. I know what to do with this. And ultimately, this sort of became I think, the defining trait of me as a researcher. I'm a person who likes to build things. Yes, I do methodology on occasion when I need the results of the methodology, not for its own sake, but primarily I like to build things. I'm an applied person, which means that I live in this murky world between methodology and between applications. And frankly, this is the thing that interests me most, the challenge of trying to build a bridge between an application domain where there's something in particular that we care about and want to make happen, and this wonderful world of methodology and science where we have these terrific tools. Well, how do we make these tools good for something? This is what applied researchers do, what applied research is about, I think. Why do I tell you this? It's not all about me. That wasn't really what I had in mind. It's just sort of the nature of the aha moment, as these things are sometimes known as. Everybody's familiar with the kind of aha moment where at last you understand this thing that you're studying. At last it makes sense, you get the crucial idea, but there are other kinds of aha moments. There are ones that are really not about what you're studying, but about you yourself. These were my aha moments when I realized who I was as a researcher. And once you figure that out, the rest is, well, not easy, but not at all, but much easier. So I encourage you here, most of you are graduate students. Well, you're a graduate student. This is the time to make this happen. That's what the most important thing that happens in graduate school. You figure out who it is that you are. Any questions? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so now my talk, right. I'm going to talk about my research. So here is sort of the defining picture. I think if you just look at this for a little bit, the subject is musical accompaniment. And if you know about what it is that classical musicians do, anything I say is just going to sound hopelessly reductive and simplistic to you. But in the event that you don't, in this particular situation here, okay, there's this woman in pink. She's the soloist. She is due for this absolutely thrilling experience, just the greatest feeling of being alive that I've ever known was when I was in that chair there. So her role is to sing her heart out. And then maybe there are these 50 or so folks behind her. And what they are supposed to do is to facilitate things for her, to follow her, to make her ideas happen. So in a way, I'm not going to talk about her. I'm going to talk about, do you see this one in the back? You can't even tell whether it's a he or a she. All you see is the violin sticking out. Not even important enough to have the entire body figure in the figure there. I want to talk about that individual because that person wants to be the soloist too. Everybody wants to be the soloist. And there's just so much in this picture. The demographics of the situation are just sort of painfully obvious. There are 50 or so backup players in the orchestra and one soloist. So if you rotate through this, giving everybody the same amount of time, well, maybe 1 out of 50 times you'd get your chance. Doesn't happen that way, of course. Most likely, you never get your chance. We have 200 student pianists in the School of Music at IU. Most of them go through their entire undergraduate careers never doing this, even though this picture I have here is the main focus of what it is that they want to do. It's a little ironic. So what my research is about here, there it says at the bottom, I want to create a computer program that gives them this same ability, that allows them to play the role as the soloist, and the computer is going to play the role of the orchestra. So in order to do that, it's got to hear them. It has to have some idea about how things are going to evolve, and it needs to create audio that does this. So it's a lot, really. I want to start this actually at the very end, just to make this really concrete. So a lot of demonstrations today. So in this first one, I'll just play a little bit of this for you to make sure that the audio's working and you can see things okay. Okay, and of course you can't hear anything. Ah, there it goes, okay. This is an interesting feature of this speaker, that it just stops when it doesn't get used for a while. This is the start of the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto. I chose that because the last time I spoke here, somebody really loved Tchaikovsky, and it just seemed like it was an appropriate thing to use. So the picture, you understand the audio just fine. In case you've never seen a picture like this, this is known as a spectrogram. And what you see here is frequency content evolving over time. So of course, time is left to right. That's the blue line that traces through. And frequency goes from low at the bottom to high at the top. So for instance, when I've got a single note, like the piece starts with, oh, if you know your Fourier series, you expect to see energy at integral multiples of some fundamental. So there it is at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times some fundamental frequency. And later more instruments play, and they all add up, and it gets more complex than that. But the hope is that you can look at it and at least make some sense. Well, I guess it's sort of small for you. Maybe you don't see so much back there. It won't really matter, I think. So, okay, there is the audio played through at the rate that it was recorded. And I just want to show you this technique known as phase-vocoding. Phase-vocoding is a way of playing back audio at different rates without actually changing the pitch content. So for instance, you can listen to your professor speaking 10 times as fast and not have to spend so long in lecture and still absorb as much. Maybe I'll do it just a little bit faster. So here's 30% faster. Oh, we can do it faster, 60% faster. Or it can be slower than unit rate. Half rate, or 70%. I can mess around with this as it plays. The rate can be 0. It's a frozen moment of musical time. You can ask yourself whether this is meaningful in any musical sense or not. I don't know the answer to it, but phase-vocoding makes it happen. You can go backwards. Why not? We're going slower. Okay, so there's phase-vocoding. You go backwards and you listen for hidden messages buried in the music. You folks are probably too young to get that reference. So, okay, this is sort of a nice way to frame the talk. Here I am tweaking the play rate, going faster and slower. It's very easy to do. This is the whole thing that my program does. I'm going to tweak that play rate faster and slower, in such a way that the phase-vocoded audio is going to follow the soloist. So in some sense, this is very simple what I am trying to do. There's some one-dimensional function that gives me my position in the music as a function of time, and I want to figure out what that is. Well, on the fly, of course. It's a real-time problem. This is all I'm trying to do. There are many other things one could do with this. I'm restricting this to a rather limited problem statement. Okay, well, if we're going to do this, the first thing that we have to do is figure out some way to hear the live player. And what I want to present is a way of doing this with hidden Markov models. Oh, my background was in speech recognition and character recognition, and these are terrific tools for doing that. They work really well for music, too. So in this particular case, I've got the score. This is the really important thing to understand. So the music's written out ahead of time, and it says what are the notes or the pitches or frequencies that are going to appear, and approximately how long they sound for. That's given. The person will make mistakes, and there'll be all sorts of warping of timing, and times when the sound isn't even pitched at all. But this much is given to me. So I need to make use of it. And what I'm going to do is, for every note that I have in the score, I'm going to build a little Markov model. So what I've done is I have a couple states that for each note are associated with the beginning of the note, and then a number of states with self loops. So there are a couple parameters for each of these notes, how many of these things are chained together, and what the transition probabilities are. And I'll build a little model like this for each note in my score, and I just chain them together in left to right manner. So, oh, there are many notes in the score. There are thousands, maybe tens of thousands of states in this graph. But still, in principle, it's very simple. It's just this left to right concatenation of these really simple models. And OK, so that's the hidden process, the Markov chain. It's clearly a Markov chain. In a hidden Markov model, there's something that you observe. So the idea is that every time I visit one of these states, one of the circles in my diagram, I spit out one of the columns of that spectrogram that I showed you, a little piece of audio, if you will, say 1/32 of a second, a short little fragment of audio. And OK, I have to model the conditional distribution of that given the state that I'm in. I'm going to leave this out and just sort of stick very much at the high level of how the listening works. And the first problem I want to talk about is what's known as the offline listening problem. So that means I give you the complete performance, and you have all the time in the world to figure out how it matches to your score. And in determining the onset of any particular note, you can look both forward in time and backward in time. It's offline, not in real time. So the way this is done is, OK, let's say I'm trying to figure out where the kth note begins, the onset of the kth note. So what I can do is taking all of the data, so the y's are the data, these are my observations. So given the complete collection of observations, one thing that you can do with the HMM is compute the conditional distribution of any one of the state variables. For any frame, any one of the columns, if you will, of that picture I showed you before, I can figure out the probability that that frame lies in the start of a particular note. Each node has got a distinguished state, start 1, start 2, et cetera. I can figure out the probability of being in the start of any particular note, and I look for the frame that is most likely to be in the onset of that particular note. And I say, OK, that's where it begins. So this is standard HMM fare here. I want to show you an example of how this works. For some reason, I haven't figured out I need to bring up my program again. After I do the phase vocoding, nothing works. It takes a second to load this score. Okay, so here is the audio, like what I showed you before. But what I've done now is I've put these vertical lines that mark the onsets of all the notes that I'm looking for. And so I play the audio back. I'm going to put a little ping at the start of each note at the pitch that the note is supposed to be. The score gives me the pitches, so I know these. So the nice thing about this is it's pretty easy to look at these and listen to them and figure out if they're right. If anywhere you see a purple line someplace in the picture, that means I didn't get that one right, and I fixed it by hand. So here's some recognized audio by the method I just described. All right, enough of that. Okay, so this is the offline listening problem. Of course, it's much easier than what we really need to do in practice. In the real problem, what we have to do is understand the audio as it comes in. If I'm going to try and follow the live player, I don't get to wait until they're done and then compute my accompaniment. I need to do this in real time. So here's the online version of this, and I think that there are a lot of nice things about the probabilistic formulation of the hidden Markov model that just seem to be natural in the way they find application here. So here, let's imagine I'm waiting for a particular note. I'm waiting for the kth note. So what I do is, okay, I'm at frame in. That's what I've heard so far. So this is the audio data that I've encountered. And it's a simple thing to compute the filtered distribution and compute the distribution on the current state variable. Everything I know about where I am now in that graph in the score, given the audio that I've heard so far. And since my states are ordered left to right, I mean, in a general graph, this might not be meaningful. But for my particular graph, it's meaningful to say whether I'm before, at, or after the start of that note that I'm looking for. So I can compute the probability of being at or beyond that particular state that's associated with the start of the note I want to hear. And I just monitor that probability. This is the probability that the note is in the past. And I monitor it, and when that probability gets to be big enough, I say, okay, I'm sufficiently confident that that note is in the past. It's time to estimate it. So, okay, let's say n star is the frame where I know that note is in the past, where this threshold is exceeded. And I take the audio data that I have up to that time, and now I'm looking backward. So I've got this much audio data. Here's the start. Here's the end. N star is over here. I'm looking backward at all of these frames, trying to determine for each one, what is the probability that that state variable occupies the start of the note that I'm looking for. I choose the most likely one. I say, I found it. I spit that one out. That's where the start of that particular note is. So you can think of this as being something like a running commentary on the person's audio. The audio comes in here. What comes out is this collection of detections. And I guess this is sort of obvious, but I can't possibly hear something until a little piece of it's happened. So my detections are always going to be a little bit late. Sometimes they might be quite a bit late. It sort of depends on how I want to trade off accuracy for being responsive. Yeah?
I just had a quick question on your features. Are you just using raw spectral features, or you do it in CCs? Or?
Yeah. I was hoping to sweep that one under the rug, but since you ask, no, I model, I model a distribution on the entire frequency spectrum, or it's the modulus of the frequency spectrum. So it's treated as a real vector. And maybe I'll come back to this. I can write this out if you like, but it'll take me a little bit of time to do it. For many years, I did this with, maybe 20 or so specially designed features assumed to be conditionally independent given the state, and I used the usual machine learning techniques to train them. And unfortunately, that rather intelligent method seems to work worse than the less intelligent method, which I'll show you in a minute when, well, give me a little time, I'll come back to this, but I'll show you exactly what it is that I do. I swept it under the rug for now. Okay, so online listening is always a little bit late. This is important, but it has to be late. That's sort of obvious. So here's a demonstration of how that works on the same excerpt that I just showed you. What you're going to see now are these green markers that are going to appear at the top of the image up here. And each of those mark the detection of a note onset. And if you listen very carefully, you'll notice that you hear it before you see it. That's the inherent latency. There's always going to be latency in making the detection. That's not to say that the detection is inaccurate. It just means you don't get the detection until you've heard a little bit of the sound. So watch the green marks. This is the online listening. Never mind this here. Wait till the soloist comes. Okay, I'll come back to this in a minute. If you're looking carefully, you probably notice not every note gets detected. There's always more to the story. The basic philosophy is once I've decided a note is in the past, I compute the conditional distribution on the onset time given what I've seen. If that conditional distribution is not sufficiently peaked, say it's bimodal or something like that, maybe I'm not really so sure where that note began. In a situation like this, you're way better to do nothing rather than to incorrectly say where the note onset is. It's sort of this basic, I'm sure, at some time you've had a classmate who insisted on volunteering the answer whether or not they had any idea whether they were right or not. And it doesn't work so well. So the philosophy here is if you're not sure, better to remain silent. So, right, there's the online listening. So, okay, we've got online listening. So at this point, we're done, right? No, of course not. There are actually a number of accompaniment systems that have tried to base themselves completely on online score following. It doesn't work. It's very simple to explain why it doesn't work. Here's the way to do it. Just sort of imagine, okay, you folks are going to be the orchestra, and I'm going to be the soloist. And I have my part, I just have one note. I go bum. And your part is the same. When I do my note, you're supposed to do your note. So are you ready? Nobody's ready. You don't know what you're supposed to do. When I go bum, you go bum. Okay, are you ready? Okay, here we go. Bum. You're late. Should we try again? Or it's hopeless. I mean, I suppose there really isn't any point in it. The good news is it's not a particularly reasonable analogy to what the accompaniment problem is like. Here is a much more reasonable case. Yeah?
Yeah, I want to ask a question. Is it like the objective of your project, as in like you have a soloist and like the backup group is supposed to reproduce every single note, or is it like when you have a band and there's like a lead guitar player and like the second guitar is supposed to like play the chords like in the same time?
It's the latter situation. So the typical classical music arrangement is all the notes that are going to be played by anyone in the room have been written out. It doesn't necessarily mean every note that the soloist plays has got a corresponding event with the orchestra. It doesn't work that way. There could be very complex interplay between the two, but still, they're written out ahead of time. So the orchestra is just trying to figure out how to play in such a way that what they have coincides rhythmically with what the soloist is doing.
And then playing at the same scale, something like that.
Playing at the same scale.
Yeah, like the same scale.
You mean like scale in terms of pitches?
Scale, like either like G scale or A scale.
But that's written out by the composer, so that decision's already been made. This is about timing here. I'm sorry? I'm sorry, I can't hear it.
You could record all the music other than the soloist and play it and then play along with the music. I'm trying to understand.
Oh, right, okay. So that's a very good question. I can't believe I didn't answer that.
Like 5 minutes late if you did, I'm sorry.
No, I didn't. Well, the short answer is because musicians hate that. So this takes the soloist and puts them in a straitjacket. The whole idea is they're supposed to be at liberty to do their thing. And this feeling of freedom is what the whole experience is like. So if you have them play along with the record, this is what the Music -1 company did for many years. And it's sort of derided by serious classical musicians because it makes them the follower, not the leader. They're supposed to be the leader. So this difference is really all the world. Okay, so back to our example of following. Okay, I'm going to change it around a little bit, and now I'm the soloist, and my part goes da-da-da-dum. And your part is just the same. You arrive with me on the 4th note. Okay, so understand how this goes? Okay, here we go. Ready? Da-da-da-dum. Most of you didn't even play. Okay, let's try it again. Da-da-da-dum. Yeah, bravi. Okay, tutti bravi. Now, here I like this. Here's a feel-good movement. I'm going to show you how incredibly smart you are, at least compared to a computer. We're going to do it again. Are you ready? Da-da-da-da. Okay, just think of all that you did there. Okay, so you realize that my part is not rigid. There's at least one degree of freedom there, the tempo, the speed. You estimated that degree of freedom. Using that estimate of the degree of freedom, you predicted into the future to figure out how my part might evolve. So you had a prediction when I first played, you changed it, and most of you got there more or less at the right moment. Very good. So that's really exactly what I want to get my program to do, is just to model that 2 seconds worth of intelligence that you exhibited there. It takes me years to actually make this happen, but that's it in a nutshell. So, okay. Here it is a little bit more explicitly. So I've got a model. So, okay, I've got a process, TK, that's going to be the tempo in seconds per measure at the kth note. And I've got another process, SK, which is the collection of onset times for the notes, say in seconds. And here's a very simple model for how these evolve. The tempo process is is modeled just as a random walk. I get the time today as the time yesterday plus some zero-ish random increment. More on those later. And I get the time of the next note, the onset time of the next note, as the onset time of the previous note plus the length of the current note in measures times the tempo in seconds per measure. So that product gives me the time that that note takes, the total amount of time for that note. And if I add those two together in sort of a perfect world, or at least in a perfectly rigid world, that's where the next note would occur. But of course, things are more complex than that in practice. I have another variable that allows the onset of the coming note to not just depend on the current tempo, but also to have some note-by-note stretches. You can sort of think of this as, oh, it's a very common interpretive device for a player to have evenly spaced notes, and maybe they do something like so-called agogic accent. It's a very common thing to do. I want to have the ability to learn that the player is doing something like that. So I'm going to explicitly allow for it in the model in a way that, will become a little bit clearer on my next slide. So, okay, the rhythmic performance is parameterized by the Greek letters, the taus and the sigmas. The taus tell me the changes, the local changes in tempo. Am I getting faster or slower at this particular point? The sigma k's, these tell me if a note is stretched or compressed in compared to its length according to the tempo. So, okay, maybe to make that a little bit more formal. So here it is written out as a linear difference equation. I look at this, the new vector is given by some matrix transformation of the old vector. Just verbatim, writing out what I had before, now in matrix notation. The only difference here is I've explicitly said how I'm modeling the, quote, updates. The Greek variables I call the updates. They're modeled as normal, so it's a linear difference equation driven by noise, a very common situation, nice and tractable. And these parameters that describe the noise give me some way of learning the rhythmic interpretation. The mean variables for these particular updates, these tell me what happens on average. Where is a place that the player tends to speed up or slow down or stretch or whatever. The sigma variables tell me something about how repeatable these things are. Is this something that happens the same way every time, or is there quite a bit of flexibility? So these are the things that I'm going to learn later on. Yeah, is that a question there? No, okay. So here's another picture of the model. It's written out as a graphical model. So this process that I described here, that's this line in the picture called composite. Each one of these is a tuple, a tempo variable and an onset time variable. And each one of these tempo and onset pairs depends on the previous tempo and onset time and the update variable, this thing here, as described by the graph. So this bit here is the middle two lines, the update variables and the composite variables. So I'm going to bring this back to what I was talking about before. Where does the listening figure in? Well, every time the listener detects the onset of a note, I'm going to view that as a noisy observation of the true onset time. That's what I'm thinking of the SK being. That's the true onset time. And what the listener gives me, well, the listener makes mistakes. So it's something which is the true onset time, say, plus some kind of zero mean noise. And I do something similar with the accompaniment times that I'm actually going to try and plan. Those will be modeled in a similarly ways, randomly related to the truth. So now I have a chance to actually do something. I advertised at the start of my talk that I'm going to try and learn what the live player is doing. So Well, okay, so that's what my kind of research is about. I've now cast this in terms of a statistical problem. This is what we do in rehearsals. We rehearse with people because you're trying to be able to develop some way of predicting how things are going to evolve, so you will be able to anticipate the future. That's just what I'm doing here. And the learning problem, well, okay. Let's say I want to learn one of those particular, I want to learn the parameters for one of those particular update variables. So given all of the observations, every solo onset time that was detected, I can take those, and using the usual kind of machinery from graphical models, I can get the conditional distribution on this hidden variable. I never observe the update variables directly. And, well, you might imagine, okay, the conditional mean, that might be a reasonable estimate for the true mean. If I had several performances, I might average those conditional means and get maybe a better estimate of the mean variable for this particular update. Well, the EM algorithm does something a little bit smarter than that, but it's actually something very close to what I just said, just fixed up a little bit to turn out to be maximum likelihood estimation. So that's the spirit of the way the learning works, and this is the way I manage to anticipate the way things will evolve more accurately than I can at first blush. Okay, so how does the accompaniment scenario work, the real live accompaniment scenario? So my program just has, it's got sort of very small goal. All I'm going to try and do is schedule the pending accompaniment note. The black things, they've already been played or detected, so those are observed variables. This is what I call the pending, the next accompaniment note. I want to schedule where that should be played. And the natural thing to do is, given the observations I have, now, rather than working top down, I'm working left, right. Given the black variables, I can compute the conditional distribution, again, by the usual machinery of belief networks. And maybe I'll schedule this, say, at the conditional mean time. That might be a reasonable thing to do. So, okay, maybe I do that, and what might happen is I get another note. So before this is actually played, maybe I detect another solo note. And now I'm getting closer to the point of coincidence, so that's probably going to change my opinion about when this note is actually going to be played, and hence when this note should be played. So I will recompute. Every time I get more information, I recompute the time of the pending accompaniment note. It's like schedule and reschedule. And I guess to bring this back to what I started out with, what does it mean to schedule a note here? Well, all that really means is I've got my phase-vocoding process. If I want to arrive at the pending note at a particular time, I just change the playback rate. I'm not changing the rate of the performance. This is something that generally happens within a single note. So I'm just moving through a particular note or maybe a pair of notes more faster or less fast. So this is the way the prediction engine works. So, okay, I'm going to come back to this thing that I did a minute ago, and there were these the red lines here on the bottom. Now I'm going to explain what these are all about. These are the predictions. So I'm going to show you exactly the same thing that I did before. I just want you now to focus on these red marks up here. These are the rightmost, the rightmost red mark. This is the pending accompaniment note. And if you watch carefully, what you're going to see is it gets scheduled, and then it wiggles around. As more green notes appear, I revise my opinion of where that pending accompaniment note should be played, and I change my playback rate and expect it to appear at a different time. Until finally the blue line, that's where I am now, the thing that just moves and marks time, crosses the red note. Then it's in the past. So what's done is done. I played it. Now it's on to the next note. So here is really the whole thing right here in a nutshell. It'll play. There we go. I hate to stop, but once I start listening to that, I can go on forever. Okay, so well, what I was hoping for now, if I'm lucky, I'd like to do a live demonstration, and I was just wondering, does there happen to be anybody in the audience who plays the French horn? Nobody plays the French horn? Ah, there is somebody. Ah, I was worried that that might happen. Okay, good. This is Rong Jin. Rong Jin is my student at IU. I knew she was going to be here. Okay, so you can get your horn out and warm up a little bit while I describe, oops. Oh, right. Okay, so the next question I always get this question, you know, I get it in a lot of different ways. I mean, what happens if a person plays a wrong note? Well, we got a French horn here, so at least 1 out of 10 is guaranteed to be wrong. I don't know if you know anything about the horn. It's a very hard instrument. Oh, what happens if they play in an unexpected way? What happens if they do everything they can to try and break your system? Well, okay, we're going to get a demonstration of that. She might succeed. I used to have more pride about this, and I would do the demonstrations myself, and I would never really allow things to break. I'd go as far as I could without allowing that to happen. But now we're throwing caution to the wind. So what we're going to do is play through a section a couple times. The first time I'm just going to have what I'd like Rong to do. Are you listening to this, Rong? Okay, so she's going to start out playing a little bit of the third Mozart concerto, and she'll start out normal, and she's going to get progressively more odd. So, okay, here are the rules, Rong. You cannot leave out notes on purpose, although if you play wrong notes by accident, so be it. You know, those things happen. It'll happen. And you can get more and more extreme with your tempo changes just to see how far things can go without it actually breaking. And if it breaks, so be it. Okay, but I need to get on the other side of you. So there we go. Right, okay. Okay, so here, so you can put that on your bill. It's always awkward to do this. There we go. That should work just fine. I'm just testing audio here, don't worry. Hello, hello? Okay, looks like it works. Okay, so here we go. Okay. We have to let her play it one time for real. That was just sort of a circus show. So okay, you get to play it for real now. However you like. Okay. Thanks, Rong. That was great. Okay, well, I was going to talk a little bit about open problems because there are plenty of them, really. But I think maybe I won't if I see, it looks like I'm getting toward the end and I've got a few minutes left. I'd rather just open things up for questions, if there are any.
So can it hear, I mean, it sounds like it's mostly hearing single note lines. Can it follow chordal instruments like a piano part or something like that?
Right, to some extent. So the violin is partly polyphonic in that you can play several notes at once. Sometimes you even play counterpoint on the violin, although usually it's chord, chord, chord. So the whole listening is oriented toward, the musical term for it is homophonic music. Things are composed of series of chords. And even if there's sort of complex interplay between the parts, you can still make all of these vertical cuts every time any voice changes and look at the music as a sequence of chords. So it handles it pretty well for the kind of polyphony that the violin exhibits. There was some in the Tchaikovsky there. The piano, so that was one of the open problems. The listening problem for the piano is considerably difficult, considerably more difficult. We can sort of do it, but not quite well enough. And also the voice is also quite a bit harder for different reasons. The voice, of course, doesn't commit itself to pitch as clearly as other instruments do. So it's in the category of open problems. I think the solutions here are actually machine learning types of techniques. So it's within reach, but not done yet. Yeah? Okay, so just to add to a couple open, nothing else? Yeah?
Sorry, I missed something. What's the purpose for the first performance and second performance, and how to evaluate it can predict correctly?
Well, there's okay, so what's the difference between them? In the first, she was just being a little bit silly, trying to challenge the system to create problems by playing with rather extreme variations in timing. And the second one is really a more realistic one. In this particular case, the Mozart concerto there's not a huge amount of rubato or changes in musical timing to it, so it's not as hard a problem as the Tchaikovsky. And the way you evaluate, so the most obvious way to evaluate it is the system will make real-time predictions, modified as it gets more information about when events should occur. And there are times where they actually do occur in the solo part, and there will be a discrepancy between these. So there's sort of the most simple-minded way of evaluating performance. But I would be remiss as an applied scientist to tell you that that is everything that you need to know. There's sort of two objectives that the accompanist has. One, of course, the accompanist wants to be with the soloist. That's part of it. But also the accompanist has got a musical agenda of her own, trying to play the part in a way that makes musical sense and is internally consistent. So it's a battle between these two things, and trying to mediate between them is what a good accompanist does. So it isn't really all following, although that's the easy thing to measure. Measuring the other one is a much more subjective thing. It's just a subjective thing, although we certainly know when we get it wrong.
Have you looked at applying the system to any other predictions of sort of like, for instance, there's a damping system. So you're listening for changes in the vibration and when to apply a damping system to some mechanical object. Like any of the things outside of the musical realm that might fit?
Well, that's a good question. I must have sometime, although I can't think. This model is sort of designed to be particularly with music in mind. But certainly, okay, what is the essential model? It's the Kalman filter, really. It's a little bit more complex than that, but it's a slightly souped up version of the Kalman filter, which is, like the classic prediction engine for mechanical systems. The linear dynamics are the things that the physics tells you, and then of course the world is not so perfect, or there's some sort of external control. These are the update variables. So while I'm not doing it, there's just an enormous amount of literature on this particular kind of approach.
You might allude to this in your open problem, but I'm particularly interested, say, in various forms of music where there's no notes, so unsupervised learning, in other words, Indian classical music, and you want rhythmic accompaniment to that.
Yeah.
And this is, I mean, even some experts, you require like 30 years of experience to often accompany well to see a sitar player and so on. So, I mean, where do you think this is going in terms of that direction?
Yeah, okay, I'm interested in that problem too. Understanding a musical line without a score requires an enormous amount of intelligence. And it would be accurate to say that nobody can come very close to doing this yet. Getting the pitch is within reach. That's almost doable. Getting rhythm is sort of surprisingly hard. We tend to notate, we notate rhythm in a very strict sense. Rhythm is notated in terms of rational numbers, so that you're given the length ratio between any pair of notes. But what happens in practice is a far cry from this. And people use global, sophisticated cues in understanding rhythm. I mean, sort of the basic idea that permeates our understanding of rhythm is when you hear the same thing, and it could be the same rhythm, the same pitch pattern, the same shape of notes, the same short rhythmic fragment, the default assumption is that it appears in the same position in the rhythmic hierarchy. So this is sort of the most crucial thing that people use to understand the rhythmic essence of music. Now, if you can figure out how to model this, I'm very much interested in this problem. I think it's a really terrific problem, but it's open, and I haven't seen a really good idea on this yet. Just, so I have a student who's posed this problem that we've talked about a lot, where you don't even have any pitch recognition. You just say you've got a MIDI piano, so you get events coming out of the piano that say, this note, this pitch happens at this time. And your goal is to understand this rhythmically. And they're just going to improvise. This is a very interesting, difficult problem. But somehow you're going to have to find some way to model notions of sameness within a rhythmic hierarchy to get this. I don't know how to do it. No one does.
Player profile, and basically if you have someone who's playing that in your modeling as well?
Well, generally I'll train from several examples. The thing about musical interpretations is they tend to be a moving target. People start out with an idea of what they want, and immediately they find themselves in the company of the ensemble, and everything's different. And even, aside from that, people's ideas about the way they want to play are always changing. So I think that the thing that seems to work best in practice is to use a limited number of training examples, 5 or so, reflecting what they're thinking about today or yesterday and not delving into the distant past. Yeah, it's a good point. It's always a moving target.
I used to be in an orchestra, so I play the accompaniment part, but I'm not professional, so I often make mistakes. So one case is like I'm totally lost, so I wait for several minutes and join the orchestra again. So I'm wondering if your system also has this kind of situation that it's lost, but your system has the ability to find the right position back again.
Well, usually when I say, for me in my community, when we use the term lost, what we usually mean is irretrievably lost. But I assume what you mean is having misidentified some notes and still able to recover from that. Yeah, actually it does quite well at this. And I do this thing every year, so I'm just about to do it now with the IU String Academy students. We do a concert where I'll have 8 or so of them come and play concerto movements. And these are young students. They're in high school. Some of them are extremely talented. Some are actually even younger. They start at 8. The younger ones are sort of the most amazing. But they will occasionally do this kind of thing where they start playing, they stop, and then they begin again. And yes, the system needs to be robust enough to follow something like that. The basic idea is just that of a beam search. So I guess I didn't really go into the computation enough to make this clear in what I did before. But in practice, okay, you can't do, you cannot compute the filtered distribution, which is in principle a distribution on all, several thousand states for every frame of audio. You'll keep, I don't know, maybe the 100, 200 most likely states. So as long as the correct area stays within this beam of possible locations that you're looking at, there's the potential of recovering when things get off. And usually this is what happens. Once in a while someone does succeed in just totally losing things. So yeah, that can happen. It doesn't really happen very much with the kind of things that players do in practice. If you try and do it, you can do it.
How taxing is it on, I mean, you're running it on your laptop, so clearly it's not that, it's just laptop.
Yeah.
But if you scale up the processing power, can you add more of these Kalman states and have it be more robust?
Yeah, I suppose you could. The truth of the matter is mostly my program sleeps. It doesn't actually process very much of the time. The problem is it's a real-time application, and the computation needs to be driven by the worst-case scenario when the processing demand is greatest. It needs to be able to keep up. I sort of grew up in an era where computing resources were really dear. And I programmed all this myself, and I did it like a total fanatic. It's all low-level C, and I just think about not wasting any byte or cycle. So it's far more efficient than it probably needs to be. I think someone looking at this in this day and age could be much more relaxed about the computation. Yeah, I could probably deal with a much wider beam than I do, and maybe recover from an occasional situation that I fail on. I don't think it'd make a huge difference. Okay, well, I'm over time. So thanks very much for your attention. I know it's the end of the day, and it gets a little bit hard to pay attention, and you're probably thinking about your dinner. I know I am. So thanks very much for listening.